Today is the Rambam's yahrzeit. So to learn Rambam on the day the Rambam passed away is a very, very big merit. And I think it's fascinating that today I think... Huh? No, he was born on Erev Pesach. He passed away on the 20th of Tevet, yes. Yeah. People light a candle, make a seudah. In today's chapter, the Rambam says, Ani Omer, I say. So he appears in person in today's chapter. So it's a very, very big hashgacha pratit, very big divine providence that we're learning Rambam on the Rambam's yahrzeit. So here we go. Hilchos Naarah Besulah Perek Sheni, the laws of the virgin girl, chapter 2. Yesterday, we learned that there are two ways that a man can, so to speak, violate a virgin girl, either by rape or by seduction. In both cases, the Torah prescribes a fine of 50 silver coins. In the case of seduction, you only pay the fine if you choose not to marry her. In the case of rape, you pay the fine regardless, plus you have to stay married to her. Today, the Rambam is going to move to discuss other monetary payments that are involved with rape and seduction. Because even though it sounds like from yesterday there's only one payment called the knas, the fine, but there's also more payments that you have to pay for physical damages. Says the Rambam, halacha aleph, 50 kesef shel knas. The 50 silver coins that we talked about yesterday, in terms of the fine, heim dmei hanas shchiva bilvad, are only considered to be the payment for the pleasure of the relations. That's what the fine is for. However, in addition to that, you have to take into account that the girl was violated in other ways as well. The chayav hamefate, a man who seduces a woman, is also obligated litein boishes upegam, to compensate for the embarrassment and for the physical damage yoser ala knas hakotzav b'Torah, over and above the fine delineated by the Torah. Yeser alav ha'oines, more so is the rapist shehu noisen as hatzar. Besides for paying embarrassment and physical damage, he also has to pay for the physical pain. But the seduced girl doesn't get payment for the pain. Why? Says the Rambam, Shahaniv eles birtzaina ein latzar. Of course, if a woman is seduced into relations, she's consensual, she's not going to have pain. Anusa yesh latzar, but a raped girl has pain. As a matter of fact, the Torah itself makes that clear. By the raped girl, what does it say? He needs to pay, and she needs to become his wife. Look at the red words here. Tachat asher ina, in place of the fact that he pained her. There's literal reference to the idea of pain. Inui is affliction. So therefore, the rapist has to pay one more element of payment. So yesterday we talked about the basic knas, the fine. Today we're learning a couple of more layers. Both for the rapist and the seducer, there's embarrassment and damages. And then at least for the rapist, there's pain. And the Rambam will soon define how each one is evaluated. It says that Rambam Malacha Beis Nimtza, it turns out, Hamefate Meshalim Shleisha Dvarim. A seducer pays three types of payments: knas, ubeishes, upegam, the fine, embarrassment, and damages. V'ha'oines arba, and a rapist pays four types of payment: knas, ubeishes, v'tzar, upegam, fine, embarrassment, pain, and damages. Now, how do we evaluate these payments? It says the Rambam Malacha Gimel knas shave b'koil. The fine, the $50 fine, 50 silver coin fine, is equal. It's one size fits all. Echad haba al bas koyin gadol. Whether the man raped the daughter of the high priest, she'd be the top of the line, or you rape the daughter of a convert or an illegitimate person, lower on the pedigree line, doesn't matter. The fine is the same. Knasa 50 kesef, her fine is 50 silver coins. But embarrassment, damages, and pain are not equal by everybody. These are personal sufferings. They require appraisal. Halacha Dalet, Keitzad Shamin Haboishes. How do we go about appraising embarrassment? Hakoil lefi hamivayesh v'hamisbayesh. We must always take into account the person committing the embarrassment and the person being embarrassed. She'einay daima mivayesh Naarah chashuva o mimishpacha miyuchasa. You certainly cannot compare somebody who embarrasses a girl who is important and from a genealogically important family, lemivayesh kitana aniya bezuya, to one who embarrasses a small girl from a poor, degraded family. The embarrassment for the higher status girl would obviously be more. She suffers a greater embarrassment. You cannot compare somebody who gets embarrassed from a very important and great person lemizbayesh me'echad mehanavalim v'kal min akalim, versus somebody who experiences embarrassment at the hands of some disgusting, low-life person. And here the commentaries debate which one is worse. Is it worse to get slapped by a rebbe and get embarrassed, or is it worse to get slapped by some loser? So here the commentaries write that when a higher status person embarrasses you, there's greater embarrassment. Right. But the Rambam himself seems to say in the 10th book, when he talks about damages, that's the opposite. A person would rather get embarrassed at the hands of a high status person. At least he can feel that it's befitting. If the Rebbe saw fit to slap me, I probably deserve the slap. But if some idiot comes over and embarrasses you in public, your embarrassment is that much greater. The point is that the fine of embarrassment depends on the social stature of the both parties involved. So according to this, the judges examine his stature and her stature. Vishamin, and here's how we appraise the money. We say like this: how much money would the father or the family of the girl be willing to pay to avoid such a person embarrassing their daughter? Whatever that amount of money is, taking into account, factoring in their stature, his stature, the kamayu chayav l'shalim, that's the amount the person has to pay. So based on how much a father would pay to avoid the pain, to avoid the embarrassment, is how much the embarrassment is worth. Halacha vav, pigam lefi yafya. Damages are evaluated according to her beauty. We simply, and the way we examine this, it's pretty dry, but this is how halacha does it. We examine her as though she was a slave being sold in a slave market. This is an ancient slave market. This is exactly how it was done. They used to have a stage. They would put the slaves on, and they would literally sell them for money.
That looks like American.
Huh?
That looks like an American.
Yeah, this could be an American slave market. Maybe the ancient ones look the same way. The Talmud talks about having an even hamekach. There was a stone that people would stand on to be sold on. So like here's like a stage. So we examine the girl as though she were a slave being sold on the market. Kama hishava be'ula, the kama hisashava besulah. How much would such a girl be worth as a non-virgin, and how much would she be worth as a virgin? Incorporating, of course, her physical beauty. Because we always know that virgins are more expensive, because people would rather buy a slave who is a virgin, to gift the girl to his male slave, who he wants to give more satisfaction and pleasure to. With a virgin, you get to experience both types of relations. And therefore, he would pay more for a virgin. So based on the slave market prices, we see how much she decreased in value. And that difference needs to be supplemented by the rapist or by the seducer, and he pays the fine. That's called pigam, physical damages. Tsar, how do we evaluate pain? So pain is a physical experience. And the Rambam says it goes, lefi katnusa ubinyan gufa. It's evaluated based on her youth and the build of her body. Ulefi shanav vigufay, and according to his age and the build of his body. Of course, the smaller the girl's body is, the more painful the experience is. The larger the male body is, the more painful the experience is as well. So we take everything into account. Oimdin, and again we evaluate by virtue of avoidance. We say, Kama ha'av reitzaliten, v'loi titztar zumizeh, how much would a father pay to avoid his daughter being pained in such a way by such a man, v'yitain. That amount is the monetary amount paid for pain. So that is the definition of the four types of payment: the equal fine for all, embarrassment, damages, and the physical pain. It says that Rambam halacha zayin, hamefata, a seducer of the payments that he must pay. Of course, pain he doesn't pay because there's no pain. Noisen boishasu pegam miyad. The payments for embarrassment and for damages he must pay right away, no matter whether he marries her or not. This is literally a consequence of your actions. But the fine, the 50 silver coin fine, only needs to be paid only if he doesn't choose to marry her. Shanemar, as it says, and we had this verse yesterday as well, you can see it in the red letters. If the father of the girl refuses to give her in marriage, then kesef yishkel, then he must pay out the money. But if he marries her, he gets out of paying that 50 silver coin fine. That's as far as the seducer goes. But the rapist, miyad, either way, he must immediately make full restitution. Pay all four things: the fine, the embarrassment, the damages, and the pain. And in addition to that, of course, assuming they both parties want, the father and the girl, he has to marry her as well. Lefichach, therefore, if the woman who marries the rapist wants to get divorced, or if she's widowed, ein la klum. She has no monetary claim. There is no ketubah, as we saw yesterday. All the monetary restitution has already been made before the marriage happens.
Okay.
Halacha ches bo aleha shnayim. Two men raped a girl, or seduction as well, but we'll talk about rape just to keep it easy. Echad kedarka ve'echad shaloi kedarka. One in the natural way of intercourse, and the second, not the natural way, from behind, anally. Zeh sheba aleha shaloi kedarka. So now we have to examine who came first. If the man who had relations with her unnaturally, im hu rishain, if he was first, chayav b'boisha supegam, so he needs to pay embarrassment and damages, because whether you have it naturally or unnaturally, there's an embarrassment being suffered and there's a physical damage being inflicted. However, as we saw yesterday, there is no fine for that. Fine is only for losing the virginity. The imhu acharain, but if he's second, chayav b'boishas bilvat, he's only obligated to pay for the embarrassment. Shekvar nifgama, because by virtue of the first person who naturally had intercourse with her, she was already damaged at the basic level, losing her status of being a virgin, and therefore the second person only has to pay for the embarrassment. Either way, the man who had relations with her naturally, bein rishain, bein achrin, whether he's first or last, chayav b'knas u'b'shar advarim, he's obligated to pay the fine, because he went naturally, and all the other things as well. There was an embarrassment, there was a damage, and there was a physical pain. Avol, keep in mind, however, ein boisha supegam, shel bas shaloi niva laklal, ke boisha supegam zu sheniva la shaloi kedarka. The embarrassment and the pain for a girl who had no relations ever is of course greater and different to the embarrassment and damages of this girl. In the case where the natural intercourse happened second, he can claim a lesser amount because she's already been violated in a different way. But he still has to pay the money. Halacha tes. Kvar haidanu. We've already notified yesterday. Habanes she'ein lahen knas. We've given the list of the girls who are not entitled to a fine, even in a case of rape or seduction. The Eser Hein, there are 10 girls in total. The Rambam repeats them now because we're going to go into a different law that relates to them. Habaygeres, number one. Let's actually check him out on this chart because this is going to become the subject of the next few halachot. So we have regular girls. Okay, that's in the top over here. They get, if they're raped, they get a fine, embarrassment, and pain. If they're seduced, of course, there is no. Whoops, that's a mistake.
There was a fine.
Yeah, there is a fine.
If they get married,
yes, there's no pain. This should be red. Okay.
Right.
Well, let me actually fix that right now. So let's just look at this again. So we have the regular girls who, if they're raped, they get all the payments: fine, embarrassment and damages, and pain. The seduced girls, they get the fine, of course, if they don't get married, and the embarrassment and the damage. But there is no pain. Now, yesterday the Rambam gave us a list of 10 girls who do not get the fine. And here they're going to be divided into 3 categories, okay? So let's see them inside. Habaygeres, a full major. She's past 12 and a half. V'hamimoenes, a woman who dissolves her marriage through miyun. She was in a marriage as a young child. She dissolved the marriage through refusal, and now she's raped. No fine. V'hamigureshes, a woman who was divorced after her marriage was already consummated, even if she didn't have relations. They went into a secluded room. There wasn't just consecration, there wasn't just kiddushin, there was also nisuin, and now she got divorced. If she's raped afterwards, no fine. The ha'aylenis, a barren woman, she has no physical signs that allow her to bear children. The hashoita, a mentally disturbed woman. The ha'chereshes, a deaf mute. The ha'giyoires, the ha'shvuya, the ha'meshuchreres, a convert, a captive who was freed, and a slave who was freed. Those 3 girls are always presumed to have had relations at some point in their other status. The ha'yotze aleha shem ra, and a woman who has a bad name about her. Immodest behavior is rumored to be related to her. Ushar abanes yesh lahen knas. All other girls are entitled to a fine. So here's the way it works with the other payments. Till now we talked about fine. Now let's bring that in to the other payments that we're learning about today. Says the Rambam Malacha Yud, Kol basra yesh la knas, yesh la beisha supegam. The basic rule is, every girl who is entitled to a fine is entitled also to embarrassment and damages. V'im hi anusa yesh la tsar, and if she was raped, she's also entitled to pain. That's the top column over here. Regular girls, since they're entitled to a fine, they're both entitled to embarrassment and pain, and in the case of rape, they get embarrassment and damages, and in the case of rape, they get pain. The chol bas she'ein la knas, any girl who is not entitled to a fine, kach ein la loy boishes v'loy pegam im nispatza, so too if she was seduced, she's not entitled to embarrassment or damages, v'chein im nensa, and similarly if she's raped, the commentaries insert here, she's exempt from pain. So that's going to be this category over here, okay? Although we said there's 10 girls who don't get a fine, for now we're going to focus on 6. The divorced woman, the barren woman, the convert, the captive, the freed slave, and the woman who has a bad name. Since they are entitled to a fine, they get no embarrassment or damage either, and they also get no pain, even if they're raped. And this has caused a major discussion among the authorities, the commentaries. Why would that be? What's the difference between these women and anybody else? They should have embarrassment, they should have damages, they should have pain. And the bottom line, just going to give you one interpretation. The bottom line is, the commentaries explain that we're referring to a case where there was an element of willingness in all of these women. We're not 1,000% sure that they were actually fully raped against their will. So when it comes to the, let's say the convert, the freed slave, the woman who has a bad name, these are women who are prone to having relations. So it could be that in the time of rape, they also were somewhat engaged willfully. Same for the divorced woman, we have to assume that, and the barren woman. There's basically an element where they all went ahead and in some way or another showed a willingness. Even the captive, who never had relations willingly, because even if she was presumed to have relations in a state of captivity, but it was as a captive, she was being held hostage, the Talmud differentiates between 2 types of captive women. A captive woman who once you would free her would walk away, and a captive woman who once you would free her would return to her captors. So that's the case we're talking about over here.
Okay,
A captive woman who was somewhat engaged willfully.
But if it's rape,
If it's a full rape,
then she,
and there was no element of willfulness, the commentaries say that at least you would have to give her pain if she was raped, and perhaps also embarrassment and damages in some form.
no tzar.
If they're seduced, then there's no pain. But if there's rape, yeah. If they were fully raped and there's no element of willingness at all, then the commentaries say then they would get pain. Yes. Embarrassment and damage is a little more complicated because, as we saw before, the moment you have relations at least once, your damages go way down, and same that your embarrassment go way down. So there would be more room to negotiate. Exactly. But when the Rambam makes it a blanket statement of they don't get anything, we're going to go with the interpretation that it's talking about a case where there was some form, some element of possible willingness in the act. Chutz, now that blanket rule is with an exception of mibageres umema'enes v'sheita v'chereshes, 4 out of the 10. The major, the refusal girl, the mentally disturbed, and the deaf mute. Some commentators want to switch out the mima'enet for the ailonet, for the barren woman, but we're going to go with the text the way it is over here. These 4 women are further divided into 2 categories. Ketzah, what does it look like? Says the Rambam, if somebody rapes a major girl, she's past 12 and a half, or a girl who's already been in a marriage which was dissolved through miyun. So even though yesterday we said that there is no fine for these girls, they are entitled to embarrassment, to damages, and also to pain. And as we're going to see in a second, this is only in the case of rape. Somebody who rapes a mentally disturbed woman, or a deaf mute, mishalim tsar bilvat, only pays for the pain. That's the corner over here. The embarrassment and damages are non-existent because damages are only evaluated on a slave market. These women were never sold as a slave. Nobody wants to buy them. And embarrassment also, they're not mentally sound enough to experience the embarrassment. And so therefore, we don't pay for that. Aval hamifates kulan, but seducing any of the 10, pater miklum, you're exempt from them all. There's for sure no pain, right, and there's no embarrassment and damages because these are all girls that have previously had relations in some form or another, or at least are prone to it, exactly, and therefore don't get that right. So this is the bottom line chart as the Rambam delineates it. Halacha Yud Beis. We're moving to a newer topic here. There's a rule that says, Ein Adam Mishalim Knas B'chol Makom B'Hodas Piv. Any place.
What's the last word?
Behoda'at piv. It's in the Rambam. I read it from the Rambam. If you're getting a fine, that means you're not paying in direct relation to the damage that you caused. You're simply paying, the Torah gives a fine, a defined number. You never pay that payment if you come forth and admit it. Ella al pi edim. Only if your crime was established on basis of witnesses. Any type of fine. Lefichach, therefore, ha'omer, if somebody walks into court and says, Anasti iptisi bite shel pleni, I raped or I seduced the daughter of a certain girl, a certain man, eine mishalim knas. He won't have to pay the fine. Aval mishalim b'shasu pegam b'hidas pi, but he does have to pay the embarrassment and the damages by his own admission. But the fine goes away. That's a Torah rule. Fines are only paid if there's an outside corroboration, not from your own admission. B'chein bas shetava ish bedin. Similarly, on the flip side, if the girl sues the man, he takes him to court, va'amr alay, and she tells him, Onasta oipitisa oisi, you raped me, you seduced me. V'hu aimer lehayu dvarim me'aylam, and he says, never happened. Hareze nishba shvuas heses. We're going to require him to swear the rabbinic oath. The Rambam here is referring to principles we're going to learn much more in the 13th book. One of the principles about oaths is the following. If somebody makes a claim against you, and you respond by completely denying the claim, we're worried that you're hiding something, and so we cannot accept your words at face value. We force you to take an oath to substantiate your words. People didn't take oaths lightly. When you made a shvuah, you would say Hashem's name, so if you were willing to swear to your words, that was a way of establishing the veracity of your claim. Now, let's think what happens over here. If a girl accuses a man of rape or seduction, what happens if he admits? He says, yeah, I raped, I seduced you. By his own admission, he's exempting himself from the fine. Okay? So one would think that if he then denies the claim, the woman accuses him and he goes, you know what, it never happened. In this case, we shouldn't require him to give an oath. Because what's the alternative? That he's lying? And he should admit it? Well, if he admits it, then he's going to be still exempt from the fine. So either way, he'll be exempt. Nevertheless, says the Rambam, because there's other payments involved, other payments which you still have to pay, so therefore, if you totally out and out deny the accusation, you still have to give an oath to substantiate your words, at least to get out of paying the other monetary payments. She'ilu hayda, because had you admitted, he would have to pay the embarrassment, the damages, and the pain based on his own admission. Yes, it's true, he'll get out of the fine, but the other things he would have to pay. And therefore, when he denies everything, he has to take an oath to establish his words. Halacha Yud Gimel Amra La Yanasta Oisi. A woman sues a man, takes him to court and says, you raped me. He says, no, I didn't rape you, I seduced you. It was consensual. Okay? Now here, what happens is another principle that we're going to explore at length in the 13th book. It's called Modeh b'miktzas. Modeh b'miktzat. You admit to a partial element of the claim. Whenever you admit to part of a claim, a guy says, you owe me $1,000. You say, no, I only owe you 500. The Torah imposes an oath. Not just the rabbis. There's a biblical obligation to swear to the veracity of your words. Because what you're saying is two things. You're admitting to part of the claim, but you're also denying part of the claim. So whatever you admitted, of course, you have to carry through. If a guy says, you owe me 1,000, you say, I only owe you 500, you got to pay the 500. But to get out of the other 500, you must take a shvuat HaTorah, a biblical oath. Now what happens if a girl accuses a man of rape and he answers with seduction? He's also, in effect, admitting to part of the claim. Because when you seduce a girl, yes, you don't have to pay the pain, but you still have to pay the fine and the embarrassment and the damages. So if a girl says, you raped me, he says, no, I only seduced you, he needs to swear a biblical oath to get out of paying the money of the pain, which he denies, and he must pay for the embarrassment and the damages. Because here he has agreed, he has admitted to a partial element of the claim. As will be explained in its place, we're going to have a whole section of laws dealing with that in the 13th book of the Rambam. Halacha Yudalit. A general rule. These three payments made for a seducer or for a rapist, harehin shel av. They belong to the father of the girl. The girl in that stage is always a Naarah, right? After majority, when she comes into her own jurisdiction, there is no fine. So the only time this is being paid out is when she's under the jurisdiction of the father, and the payment goes to the father. Because any profits that accrue during the time of a girl's minority, in her youth, goes to him. If she has no father, then she's entitled to the payment, she gets the money herself. What if a girl was raped or seduced in her state of being a Naarah, when she was entitled to the payment, but she only entered her claim in court after reaching majority? Oyad shenises, or after marrying, when she's out of the father's jurisdiction. Oyad shemei sa'av, or after the father died. So then harba dvarim ayashleisha shala. The 4 or 3 payments will go to her, because the incident happened when she was entitled. She only entered the claim later, so now she's in her own jurisdiction. Amda badin v'tava oisan. But if she had already went to court and already demanded the money before she went to her own jurisdiction, and only afterwards she got married or became a major, then in fact, even though in the end of the day, when she's going to collect the payment, she's going to be older, the money goes to the father. So much so that if the father dies after going to court, the money goes to his heirs, her brothers, the heirs of the father. The moment they go to court about the claim, and it was in a state of her youth, the father is entitled to the money, and that's it. It goes to his family. If a woman had gotten consecrated and then divorced in her youth, so she's still in the age where she belongs to the father, but she's in the stage where she belongs to herself, she already was in a marriage and left it, then we divide it. The fine that she gets goes to her, but all the other payments go to the father. If she was raped or seduced in a full state of minority under her father's jurisdiction, and then, before the payment was paid out, she got consecrated to another man, doesn't matter, the fine, all the other things go to her father, because she's only been consecrated, not married. Because the consecration does not remove her from the jurisdiction of the father. And the Rambam concludes the chapter with a halacha that relates to the general theme of rape and seduction. Ani oimer, I say, very rare expression of the Rambam to say I say, and I said before, I think it's divine providence that on the Rambam's yahrzeit, we learn the words I say. The Rambam in person visits us in this chapter. He says, I say, shazeh shenemar b'Torah. Take a look at this verse. The Torah says, Al techalel es bitcha lahaznoisa. Do not defile your daughter to make her into a prostitute. What is the meaning of this verse? Torah tells every father, don't put your daughter in a state of profanity by making her into a prostitute. How does that look like? This is a commandment that a father should not tell himself, look, the Torah says that if somebody seduces or rapes my daughter, I'm going to get the money. So you know what I'm going to do? I'll make it into a business. Let me rent out, let me hire out my virgin daughter to this guy. To have relations with her, and I'll set the price. Or you know what? Since I own my daughter, I'll let him have relations with her for free. A man can pardon a monetary claim to whoever he wants. I get the money, I'll do what I want. Therefore, Torah says no. Don't equate the two. Just because Hashem gives you the right to payment in case of rape or seduction, it's not your prerogative to initially start off such a pattern. Therefore, it says, do not defile your daughter. Because the fact that Torah obligates a rapist and a seducer to pay money and not to get lashes is only if it happens by chance, without the father's knowledge. Or if she didn't prepare herself to be in that situation. Because of course, a rape or seduction out of nowhere is not common and doesn't happen always. But if you're literally going to go out and leave your daughter, who's a virgin, prepared and ready to have relations with whoever wants, you are part of the problem. You're causing the world to become full with promiscuity. And it's going to come out. A father will marry a daughter, a brother will marry a sister. And if a woman becomes pregnant, no one's going to know who the father is. It's like transplanted Rambam to today's day and age. This is exactly what's happening in our promiscuous society. It's totally permissive. There's no rules. And if somebody does do that and prepares his daughter for such promiscuity, she's literally defined by the Torah as a harlot. And anybody who has relations with her, both the man and the woman, will get lashes mishum leisia kadesha, on account of the verse that says there shall not be any prostitutes among the Jewish people. So we're not going to even find him. The Torah only obligates a knas, a fine, to the one who rapes or seduces. But a woman who purposely goes ahead and expressly prepares herself for this, whether on her own consent or by her father's consent, she is a harlot. The Isur Kedesha Echadu bein Besulah bein Besulah, and the prohibition of a harlot applies both to a virgin and non-virgin girls. This is not just, I'm saying it here because it relates to the virgin, but the truth is it's a general principle. We don't just let our girls roam free. That's exactly why, by the way, the sages said that if a girl has a bad rumor about her in her youth, she's on the list of girls who get no fine. She gets no fine, as we've explained. Because she is presumed to have, made herself available for this willingly. That's why she gets no fine. And because of that, the principle is expanded as well to tell every father, you don't have any rights to take the liberty with your daughter and just give her out for free. Only if it happens against your will. And as an unusual situation, that's when we pay the fines, as the Torah dictates, for the ones v'mefater.